I'm Gene, and this is Perfect Flow. I'm a New Zealand-based athlete and coach focused on optimizing performance, health, and well-being. While I have a professional background in biomedical engineering, I've chosen to follow my more immediate passions for running, endurance, adventure, movement, nutrition, lifestyle, community, psychology, and personal growth. My goal in starting this podcast is to connect with bright minds to extract the information I need to live a life that makes sense and feels good, and share those conversations with others. Apart from your favorite podcast app, the best places to follow my work are perfectflow.nz, genebeveridge.nz, and Perfect Flow on Facebook. Hey, Gene here. Welcome back to Perfect Flow. Today I'm speaking with Jeremy Wong. Jeremy is a sports optometrist. If you're surprised to hear me speaking with someone who specializes in eyesight, then I think it'll be fairly clear by the end of the episode. Because of course, eyesight is very important for orienteering and navigation sports. I also found it really interesting just hearing about what actually goes wrong with the eyes and the kind of solutions that are out there for people that are struggling with eyesight. And there's also a bit of this for most people, I think. Even though it might not be your problem right now, our eyesight tends to only get worse with age. So the tips around prevention, I think, are something we can all listen in on, even if eyesight is not a problem that you're facing right now. So let's get into it. Hey, Jeremy, thanks for coming on Perfect Flow.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, so I'm interested a little bit in eyesight, mainly because it intersects with the navigation sports that I'm involved in. So my background is in orienteering, which is quite a finicky navigation sport where you have to read these very detailed maps and run around in the forest. And so you've got not only very fine detail to read, but also an environment that's making reading kind of challenging. Like the lighting can be bad, and your hand's unstable, you're tripping over branches and undergrowth. And and there's a lot of new people coming into the sport, and there's also a lot of older people that do this sport. So we've got people who love the art of navigation, but eyesight doesn't get any better with age, it doesn't seem. And so we're all looking for solutions, and I sent you a link to those funky glasses I had on my website. Did you take a look at that?
Yeah, they're quite funky.
Very funky. So trade-offs do get made if you get glasses that are like good for maybe something like tennis, when you're kind of working quite hard doing running, but orienteering is kind of like slow running. So there's not much airflow, and so the glasses fog up on the inside. And so they've got this ridiculous cutout to maintain airflow. And so you end up just sacrificing looks, basically. You just look ridiculous, but that seems to be the trade-off people want to make. So yeah, that's the angle I'm coming at this from. And can you introduce yourself and what your background is and what kind of jobs you end up doing day to day?
Sure. So I'm Jeremy Wong. I'm a optometrist in Auckland. I specialize in sports vision and sports-specific eyewear. So I've been doing optometry for over 29 years, and I've had an interest in the sports vision from before I graduated. So I see a lot of different patients or clients who come and see me at my practice and ask for specialist advice on different sports and their visual needs. It can be ranging from cyclists, triathletes, golfers, runners, water sports, nearly anything I've seen and tried to help people see better on pursuits, be it weekend warriors or professional sports people. So I'm sort of accredited with High Performance Sport New Zealand. So they send me athletes to check their eyes if they've got problems and see if I can help them out.
Cool. What's your most common sports? You mentioned some kind of distance and endurance sports?
Yeah, I'd say cyclists come and see me a lot, and triathletes, because they want, especially if they need a prescription to see with, they want visual solutions. So, and that could be, of course, long distance runners as well. So they might want to be able to see with sunglasses on if they're running into the sun or cycling into the sun, especially say if they're doing a 6-hour ride to 180 Ks for an Ironman. They want to have sport-specific eyewear that will meet all those needs. Like, I'll just show you something. So that is a pair of sport-specific, they're called Ready Projects. Now those we can prescription, and they can have a photochromatic lens. So what that means is when you're in bright sun, they go dark grey. And when you're at night, they're completely clear. So a cyclist or runner could use those all hours and conditions that they come into, and so that they could see or read whatever they needed to see.
Cool.
So
and just for the listeners, Jeremy's just holding up some fairly ordinary looking sports glasses, but obviously there's a bit of technology in the lens that to the layman you wouldn't know.
Yeah, so it's called a photochromatic lens. And with most sports sunglasses, they're made of a polycarbonate or high impact resistant lens, so it can't shatter. So if you're riding and you behind a truck and he flicks a stone up you at 80 Ks an hour, the stone will hit the sunglasses but won't shatter it, and it'll protect your eyes.
Cool. Is that a problem with glass?
Yeah, glass will shatter and you will potentially go blind. So it's interesting. A lot of people don't know that Ray-Ban sunglasses are made of glass. Some people know that. And they can handle what we call a drop ball test, which is dropping a ball bearing from a certain height and the lens won't shatter. But anything bigger than that ball bearing, anything going faster than that ball bearing at that speed will shatter the lens. And so then you could have shards of glass in your eye.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like a good combination to me.
Not really.
So most of us are familiar with long-sighted versus short-sighted. I think everyone has some friends at school who discover, unfortunately, that they either can't read books up close, or they learn to drive for the first time and find they have some problems with long-sighted. Those are like the main two variables to the layman, but what other variables are there that come into affecting people's eyesight other than just that one spectrum?
Okay, so you've got short-sightedness, which is where it's blurry in the distance. So you can't see past 6 meters and you need them for TV and driving. And so that means you've got good short sight, so you can read without glasses on. Okay, then conversely, you have long-sighted people who theoretically have good long sight, so they can see well in the distance, but they might find reading a little bit trickier. Okay, so you've got those two things. Then you have something called astigmatism. That's where the shape of the eye is more rugby ball shaped rather than perfectly round. And that gives you more visual distortion. A lot of people have astigmatism. It's nothing to be concerned about. It just is a shape variation on the eye. And so that's prevalent in a lot of people. But that
how does that affect the experience of seeing?
So an eye will look like an egg or a distorted egg.
Huh.
And so then that can blur things for you. Yeah, that's another factor, and that can be with the short-sightedness or long-sightedness. You've got those things. Then you have something called presbyopia, which kicks in around 45, which is where reading starts to get harder because the lens inside your eye becomes blurry. And so, yeah, the eye muscles around the lens become less flexible and the lens becomes less flexible. So because of that, you can't read and you need reading glasses. So this is interesting where it links in with your orienteering guys who are over 45. And they want to be able to read a map, your course with all the fine topography and landmarks, and they're very, very small. So they need some way of being able to read the small print while running. And so there are different ways of doing that. One is that funky pair of glasses you sort of showed me, which can work, has its limitations. There are contact lenses, special contact lenses that can let people read and see in the distance. They're called multifocal contacts. They can work very well, It just depends on the person's prescription and how well the vision is due to how the optics work. So that's a great one because you don't have to frame on, you don't have to wear glasses. So you can run in the rain.
You mentioned multifocal. So yeah, the glasses that are most common with the Orienteers are bifocal. Can you explain what bifocal and multifocal mean and why there's something secondary going on with those multifocal ones?
Yeah, so a bifocal has a moon segment, like an upside down moon segment in it. It's a very traditional old school way of reading and seeing in the distance. So they give a very good area down for reading and they give a very good area looking in the distance. But they don't give you what we call intermediate area, which is just past your hand. Then you have what we call a multifocal progressive lens. And what that should do is see in the distance, see arm's length, and read. And so there's no line on one of those, whereas a bifocal has a great big line going across the middle of the lens.
I see. So the bi is referring to the fact that if you're looking above the half moon shape, is it right to say there's no magnification if you're looking straight through? Yeah. But if you're looking down, then you're through some kind of convex lens. And so there's two different modes there. And that's the bi and the bifocal. Okay.
Yeah. And so that lets you read in the bottom part through the moon.
And there's a discrete change between those two parts, which is where you get that line.
Yeah. Very distinct. Whereas the other one is a smooth progression. So there's no line on it. And most people have progressive glasses or multifocal glasses. But they both have their limitations. Contact lenses are ideally the way to go, but some people can't wear contacts or don't want to wear contacts. So they have to wear a multifocal or bifocal to read. And then you can have a bifocal or a multifocal put into a sports frame, like the one I showed you before, and they can wear that. And they're designed for sport. So they sit well on the bridge, they fit well behind the ears, they're designed by athletes and purpose-made and purpose-built. So there are lots of options which some people just don't know about because they can't find information or they haven't gone to the right optometrist.
Cool. So what was there, before I cut you off there, was there another challenge with the eyes in addition to long-sighted, short-sighted and astigmatism? Then there was a fourth.
No, that was it. There was the presbyopia, which is where the reading gets harder, and then the astigmatism and long and short-sightedness. Mm-hmm. And depending on how much short-sightedness or astigmatism you have, depends on what could be the best option. Contact lenses are often the best option for a sports person. Mm-hmm. If we can fit contact lenses, they're the way to go. You know, they'll give them good vision, peripheral vision, so you don't have a frame on. Like I said, you know, lenses don't get wet, you know, and smeary when you're running in the rain. But not everyone can wear contacts.
Why can't everyone wear contacts? I think I've heard of one of my friends having kind of eyes that were too dry or something. But apart from that, I don't know what else.
Some people have dry eyes where they don't produce enough tears. So their tear composition isn't as good as it could be. And then the tears break up and evaporate. And then that can lead to what we call dry eyes. And so that makes the lenses more comfortable to wear. People can't tolerate wearing them for, you know, maybe only a few hours. Whereas normally you should be able to wear them like 8, 12, 14 hours plus a pair of contacts. And some people can't put the lenses in their eyes. Or some people don't like putting a contact lens in their eye. Mm. So they can't have it. So of course the other option then is LASIK or laser surgery, where they could have that correction done by an ophthalmologist with a laser, and then it takes away the short-sightedness or long-sightedness and the astigmatism, but it doesn't help them necessarily read.
What kind of things do they do with the laser?
As in what's the procedure? Or...
Yeah, what's the procedure? So, I mean, first off, shining a laser into someone's eyes firstly sounds like a bad idea. So they're obviously not like shining it straight to the retina. What are they doing?
They do what they call a little flap. So that's the front of the eye, the curve on what we call the cornea, okay, which is the clear part over the iris. They cut a little wee flap into that, lift it up, and then they fire the laser into the cornea and shape it like little wee laser pulses. Then they
Okay,
put
so the laser
flap.
doesn't penetrate very deeply
Correct.
into the eye, so it's mainly
Yep.
superficial. Okay.
It's microns,
Yeah. Okay.
and it's so precise. And then that takes little layers of the cornea away, and then the flap goes back on, and it's very, very quick. It's over in 30 seconds.
Wow.
And then the eye heals up very, very quickly from that. And then usually the person can see remarkably well in the distance.
Okay. And I'm imagining they don't do the little blasting away on the actual surface of the cornea, because that's really important how smooth that is.
Yeah.
Is that right? Right.
Yeah, so it's beneath that. Yeah.
Right. And the tissues of the eye just, sort themselves out under the surface, but you don't want to mess up the smoothness of that outer layer of the cornea.
Yeah, correct. That's not good if that's not smooth.
Cool. I was also thinking with the multifocal, the progressives. So with the glasses, you're taking advantage of the fact that the long-sightedness is always up more,
Yep.
and the medium-sightedness, that's the way the world is. Normally we hold a book below the horizon, but with the contacts, are the contacts have that similar approach where actually the contact is not, perfectly symmetrical? It's like thicker at the bottom or something. How does that work?
Very good question. So with glasses, okay, it's ergonomic design. So the top half is all distance. Okay, so it's like watching TV driving. And then you look a little bit lower and then you get what we call the intermediate. Then you look lower again, just like you'd look at your phone right now, and you're looking down with your neck. That's the reading area. Okay, so that's how progressive glasses work. When you have multifocal contacts, they're made with concentric circles and what we call a near zone and a distance zone. Okay, so the optics are really convex in this little wee piece of plastic that's like 14 millimeters wide and so thin. And what it does is, because of the optics and how your pupil works, lets you read and see in the distance. So it's like what we'd say is your old vision comes back, like you used to have in your youth. When you're 45, you can see in the distance and see and read without the glasses on. Now, sometimes, depending on the person's prescription, there may be a compromise. So they may get better near vision compared to better distance vision, depending how the lenses work on their eyes. Or they may have great distance vision and so reading. So we find out what the patient needs, or the athlete needs. Okay, so if they say, like an orienteer, oh no, I need to be able to see really close and see all the little, the little map details. Great, I'll make it so I've got that as good as I can. And if the distance is a little bit soft, that's fine, because they know where they're going. They can see the tree. They're not going to hit a tree or anything like that. And then that caters for it. There is one other way of doing it, and I've got an orienteer who's wearing it. And he's got what we call monovision. So this is another way of doing it, where we have one eye for the distance and one eye for reading. Now, it sounds a bit weird, but it's based on the monocle, where you permanently had one lens in front of the eye and it would let you read. So, you see all the war movies and those guys wearing monocles. It would let them read and then look in the distance. So it sounds an unusual concept, but it can work very, very well. It's a bit unusual, though, for an athlete to do it, because you're not binocular, so you're monocular. So it's not so good if you're playing tennis, because you haven't got 3D cues. Can be a little tricky for some people who are doing a lot of running, like footing and stuff like that. But the ones who can handle it, who have good footwork and balance, they're fine.
So does that affect your depth perception?
It does.
Is that the issue?
Yeah, that's the issue, but it does let you read.
Cool.
And it does let you run. Yeah.
Cool. So I think you mentioned you had one patient who you'd kind of gone through that process with. Maybe you've heard of more. How tough is it at first, and can you adapt to it if it's uncomfortable at first? Have you noticed like a period of weeks or months where you can actually retrain your brain and your habits to work around the new setup?
It depends on the person's visual system. Some people can handle a little bit of it, a slight disparity between the two, and that's usually fine. And they can adapt to it pretty well. When we try it, people know within a minute whether they like it or not. Because if they don't, they feel like they're sick and they're going to fall over and they're a bit woozy. But most people can handle it. And then there comes to what we call a threshold point where it's too much disparity and the brain doesn't like it and you just can't use it. That's when we've come to the limit of how the monovision works.
You'd have to be very committed at that stage to the importance of this to keep trying to train yourself. I imagine it is possible if someone spends enough time, but you'd have to be really determined.
Yeah, if especially if it's just not working, you're going to give up because it's just not going to do it. But this particular guy, he has adapted brilliantly, and I've changed his prescription and tweaked things, and he loves it.
Wow, that's really incredible. And yeah, it sounds like there is someone who's started doing that in the community. So I'd be interested to see how that spreads, because it has come up, but semi-jokingly. Like we've heard some, I don't know if it's dawned on quite so many people that it is actually possible, maybe not perfection, but to move in that direction is possible. Yeah, so that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if the optometrist isn't thinking that way or thinking about the sports recreation that their patient sitting in their chair has, or it's not been asked or mentioned, then they're not going to give that solution. Do you know what I mean? Because as an optometrist, you're here to try and help people's visual needs. So you got to find out what they're doing.
Yeah, where their values are at. And some people, this sport is a major part of their life, and being able to continue doing it is of really high importance. So this does seem inevitable that the eye, at least with this kind of stiffening or lower elasticity of the lens, is kind of inevitable with age. Are there any ways to slow that process down?
No, it's like death and taxes. It's going to get you. So from the age of 45, or from as soon as when you're growing up, it's becoming less flexible. Then 45 seems to be this magical date of year for a person to start noticing it gets harder to read. So you can't stop it, and the only thing you can do is have something to help you read.
Yeah, 45 is not that old either. I think we used to feel that it was happening a little bit older, and it's only been in the last 5 years that the Orienteering community has acknowledged that people's eyesight is going downhill around 45. And so those grades are now getting much more zoomed in maps than what they used to, whereas it used to kind of be more like the 55s and older would get, or maybe even older than that, we're only getting special treatment. And there was this kind of unfortunate group in the middle who were older than 45 but ignored.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, like the you say they've sort of been ignored a little bit. Again, it's because they got a need, but it hasn't been met. I mean, if they're blowing up the map, fantastic. They've got massive maps. That's great, but it's a bit big, but hard looking at a massive map. Carrying that around with you when you're doing your orienteering. I was just thinking, is there an orienteering like magazine or anything like that? Is it like New Zealand Orienteering, or do you have a website?
There has been in the past. Most of it has transitioned to websites, and it has been difficult keeping up a formal magazine in New Zealand. The scene's much bigger in Europe, so there's plenty of magazines dedicated to orienteering and other navigation and adventure sports over there.
But in New Zealand, is there a website where people, that you could, like, I could post an article if they wanted?
We'll see. Yeah. I'm probably the best contact in there because I do some work for them.
Yep.
But yeah, definitely that there is orienteering.org.nz is the website of the national body, the federation, and yeah, we are trying to get like more community stuff, and yeah, the magazine, the old magazine would have been kind of the way to do it, but yeah, it's definitely hard to keep up a paper magazine in modern times. So that one has slid by. So it's a little more ad hoc, but yeah, there's definitely a platform to get more of that in, and the interest is so huge because the community is so passionate about this particular sport. Like they're people who are doing it kind of against all odds, and they obviously really love it. And to see them come up against such a no deal kind of challenge with eyesight, then yeah, there's definitely a lot of interest and a lot of people coming from other adventure sports into adventure, like distance endurance sports, into adventure racing, which now has a lot of navigation components. People who never realized they had a problem, especially with a lot of the stuff that's over 24 hours long. Some of that's at nighttime. So if you're having trouble reading the day, then there's a lot of people who are having massive problems.
That's another thing. Sorry, with someone who's over 45, they need more light to read. So the eye needs more contrast, so whites and blacks. So you're going to need a head torch to read a map or anything in low light. It's just so much harder. So you need your head torch and your optical device or solution to help them read a map. And I've got. I'll bring up the association or thing about orienteering. Like I've done articles for paragliding. I've done golf articles, triathlete articles, where I think it's more important to educate people about the options. They don't have to come and see me. If they're in Auckland, great. If they can make it to see me in Newmarket, wonderful. But if they don't, they can go to their local optometrist and say, I've seen this. Can you tell me about this solution? And then the optometrist can hopefully help them out. Yep.
No, I think that makes total sense, and I wouldn't be surprised to see a flood of interest. So yeah, we'll chase that up later. I had a final set of questions just about the kind of testing that you do and how you do it. I'm sure most of us have been to the GP at some stage, and they get you to stand at some distance from a wall, and maybe it was at high school we had some like basic test and you read the letters. They slowly get smaller and smaller, but for most of us that is the extent to which we've seen eyesight testing done. So yeah, what other things do you do? And when we do that kind of testing, the kind of wording that we use is like, most of us are like 20/20. Not exactly sure what that means, so maybe you can explain that. And then some people are not 20/20. I've heard 2010 or something. Not quite sure what that means, but yeah, maybe you could explain those two things.
Sure. So 2020 is imperial measurements. So it's 20 feet, whereas we say 6'6" because it's metric. So when you hear Americans say, I've got 20/20 vision, that means they've got normal vision, which is 6'6", all right? So that means you can see a certain size image at 6 meters, or a certain size letter 6 meters away. And so if you have better vision than 6'6", it's called 6'5", 6/5, all right? Or 6/4, which is very good vision, which is sort of like 20/10, which is sort of like fighter pilot, Top Gun stuff, all right? And then if you are very short-sighted or very long-sighted, you might have we call 60/6, which means you have to see a heck of a lot bigger letter at 6 meters. So it's a lot blurrier. And so we're checking that when we check the vision, what you can see when you sit down in the examination chair. And then we find out if we can improve that so you can get to 6'6". That could be with glasses. Often it is. That's the first thing. So we're not just doing the visual check. We're checking the health of the eyes, seeing if the retina at the back of the eye is healthy, seeing the structures at the front are healthy, what we call the conjunctival, which is the white bit, around the outside of the eye. That can be affected by UV damage, and you can get things called pterygiums growing and pinguiculi. These are just normal things that can happen with a lot of sun exposure. So that's why it's important to wear sunnies, UV blocking sunnies, when you're out training or in the sun. So we check for those things, and then we check for things like glaucoma. We take photos of the back of the eye, digital photos. We can do what we call OCT 3D subretinal scans, where we have a look at structures beneath the retina. We take eye pressures. So we do comprehensive eye examinations, not just look what you can see on a chart. And they can range from, I mean, some optometrists do them in 20 minutes. I like to allocate 45 minutes to an hour to do that. So that's just a normal eye examination. But then I have my sports vision eye examinations, where I'm looking at an athlete, what visual tasks they do. Say if they're a cricketer, for instance, I'm finding out if they have problems in any area of their performance, like, oh, I keep missing, I get bowled always when it comes down, leg side. And I'm going, okay, well, where's it going? Can you not see the ball? They go, oh, I just seem to lose it. So I'm finding out why they get bowled out there all the time. Do you know what I mean? Or why they can't see the ball being released from the bowler's hand. So I check out what the sport is, find out what the deficit is, and whether I can correct it or I can train it. So that's another whole thing where I can train an athlete's, for instance, their hand-eye performance, hand-eye speed. So I can, I've got a piece of gear that lets me train the speed of how fast someone can use their hands. And I can do it to a microsecond, the speed, and check the performance and improvement for an athlete. So like someone in a ball sport, say rugby league, something like that, or I've done it for hockey goalies, where I'm increasing how fast they can move their hands and get to a ball or an object. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And yeah, just proves the simple point that taking a single dimensional measurement doesn't come close to capturing all the things that are going on in most sports. One last thing that I'm not sure if it's your area of expertise or not. What about color blindness? Is that who ends up dealing with that medically?
Well, we can diagnose it. So we've got color vision tests, and the most common one is called the Ishihara test, which is the dots. And you can say like a 6 and or a 3, and then some people just can't see them. And that's due to the rods and cones and a deficit there. So we will diagnose it. Some color vision defects you cannot cure. They just built into the retina. And so some people cannot see tonality between red and green. So if you had a rainbow of shirts on a rack, a lot of them would just look brown, So they'd be saying, oh, pick out the orange shirt, and they'll go, where? Or the red shirt, or the subtleties in the colors, they can't pick it. So sadly, you can't do a lot. So a person has an extreme color vision deficiency, can't be a pilot, can't be an electrician. It's not a good graphic designer because they come up with weird color combinations. So it does limit some people, sadly. You can get special sunglasses which filter the rays of light coming in, and apparently can give some people with color vision defects some color perception they didn't have. And they are available. There's, I think, only one practice in New Zealand that does it. And I'm not 100% sure of what the person sees, but we can see how it could effectively change colors for them.
Yeah, that's interesting. And also something that does come up in orienteering. I have one friend who does have some color blindness, and the mapping color standards are getting better, and they take the color blindness into account. So in theory, someone with some of the more common color blindness issues can still participate, but obviously that there's quite a spectrum. And I'm sure there's people who just have so little access to some colors that it's pretty hard to work around it by the sounds of it.
Yeah. If I don't know, are you orienteering maps in color or just black and white?
No, they're very colorful.
Right. Okay. So they're showing topographical color changes. Right. Yeah, that can be tricky. Yeah, that could be very tricky.
Yeah, I think it's less about the accuracy of the color and more about making sure that there's no particular color on the map that that someone with color blindness might get confused with another color.
Yeah.
So as long as, even if they do have a color blindness, they can still tell the difference between all possible combinations, then that's kind of important. Otherwise, you have these two colors that should be side by side and the boundary of which should show something distinctive in the terrain, but they can't even see the boundary. So that's kind of worst case.
So are you given the map just before you do the course?
Yeah, typically with orienteering in a race setting.
Yep. Yeah. So you just go, here's the map, go, basically.
Yeah, that's right. So it's really up to the organizers to make sure that it's printed correctly. I mean, not just correct on the computer, but the printing process itself had produced the colors as specified. So there's kind of some specifications that you're supposed to do test prints with the proper printing process before anything serious. Obviously, your local community races don't go to that standard, but yeah, it's something that comes up and kind of gets worked around. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see kind of where those glasses go in the future and whether there is some new innovation that could come out of that.
I think that they are quite expensive, those glasses, and they may not always work to the degree of what a normal person's colour vision is. So they won't necessarily give a person the whole spectrum of colours that you may need, in an orienteering map. I mean, the only way around it would be is if they photocopied it in black and white, so that there is no colour.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I mean, sure, they don't see the tonality, but they could see the grey tonalities. They just wouldn't see the colours, and then they could, have a similar, reading of the map that a colour vision.
Yeah, it would certainly level the playing field, and maybe there's something you can add with finer textures, as opposed to.
That'd be pretty tech.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Yeah, cool. Well, that's certainly satisfied my curiosity. If there's anything else you'd like to add about this world of eyesight and sports, then yeah, I'm still interested.
So with sports vision, there's three things. Two main things called protection and correction. So protection is protecting someone's eyes. Okay, so that's what I was talking about, sports sunglasses, where you're one, protecting your eyes from UV, two, protecting them from a projectile. Like I've got people who shoot, pistol shooting, cleavage shooting, and they're all wearing safety glasses because they need to. But some cyclists don't wear protective eyewear, and it could happen. You can get, quite a awful sight impairing injury, like squash players. It's crazy. The squash ball is virtually the same size as an eyeball. Okay, so it's a high-speed projectile with a lot of kinetic energy. Okay, if that hits your eye, you are a goner. Okay, but the professionals don't wear protective eyewear. They wear them in doubles, but they don't wear them in singles. And I think the youth are required to, but not all of them do. And so it's often not the person's fault. It can be a mishit, it could be a ricochet, and they've got permanent eye damage from playing the sport they enjoy, but could have been protected with sports eyewear. So those are things I like to highlight because, it's a simple thing and it could save someone's eyes. And then correction is being able to see the thing you want to see. Like I had a well-known rugby league player, and he was having trouble getting the high ball. So when a bomb was delivered to him, he was losing it. And I checked his eyes and found out he had a very small prescription. in his vision. Not a huge amount, but enough to blur him a bit. So then I fitted him with contact lenses, and he said it was amazing because now he could see the ball under low light, and the light's better because your contrast goes down, so it's harder to see the things. And his natural talent was amazing. So he was catching all those high balls and being an amazing rugby league player beforehand. But when you corrected them, he could play even better because he could see the ball. I mean, it's something quite simple, but that's interesting with sports vision. A lot of coaches don't know about it, okay, for professional sports teams. It's only now just becoming a little bit more part of what you could do for an athlete. So you've got American NFL teams and baseball teams. They're huge on sports vision. So it's an athlete needs to have their vision. If you can't see, you can't do your sport. But people don't think to have their eyes tested because they don't know what they don't know. Okay, so if it's blurry, they think it's normal. Okay, and then they go and see an optometrist and think, oh, far out, I could see better. And you've got the solution. That's the correction part. It was interesting this is a long time ago, back in 1980, I think it was the LA Games, Olympic Games. They, Bausch and Lomb, who make contact lenses, they had a booth there to test athletes' eyes. And they found out that I think more than 85% of top world-class athletes had never had an eye examination. And they found so many that weren't seeing well just from doing a screening test. And this is the best of the best, and these people, were doing it mainly off natural talent.
Yeah, that's amazing when you think of how much time a lot of these athletes have spent with a physio or on the massage table trying to optimize all these other little things.
Yeah, nutritionist, sports coach, psychology, weights, everything else, but eyes, no.
Yeah, I get the sense as well in the orienteering community that there are a lot of people who are just battling, and I think just this conversation can hopefully prove the point that you were saying earlier, that there are people out there to help, and it's pretty accessible, but it's just not kind of part of the conversation. So hopefully this can bring it into the conversation a little bit. Well, I've learned a lot, so thanks a lot for sharing your time, Jeremy.
Pleasure.
If you're enjoying the Perfect Flow podcast and want more value from it in the future, there are some ways you can support it. The first is to rate or leave a positive review on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or other platforms where it's available. The second is to share this podcast or specific episodes on social media or with friends. The third is to get involved more directly through the Perfect Flow page on Facebook, where I'm trying to construct a more interactive community. I want Perfect Flow to belong to the listeners, and if you tell me what topics you're most interested in, or even suggest specific guests, I'll do my best to make it happen. This is your opportunity to be part of something that answers your questions and adds value to your life. Another good reason to follow Perfect Flow on Facebook is that I post links to episodes, blog posts, and anything I find useful to this page. It's a great way to follow my training, racing, and learning. Another great way to stay engaged is to subscribe to genebeveridge.nz. This way you will get podcasts and blogs emailed to you, avoiding the clutter of Facebook. I don't know where this project will take us, but the reception so far has been positive. Who knows where we might be in a few years.